Hi, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here, even remotely. Um, it's an honor to introduce Maria Salviano Cortez, who is a PhD student who is visiting our department. She's completing around 6 months around us. So if you haven't had the opportunity to meet her, to have a coffee with her and feel the energy that she brings to us, you still have time. It has been a joy to have her here. So, Maria is a PhD candidate in social sciences at the Institute of Philosophy and Human Sciences of State University of Campinas, UNICAMP. We have had other visitings from the same university. You may remember Diego Vicentin, who is a professor of sociology and is also Maria's advisor at Unicamp, and also Fabiano Faletti, who was here last year, also as a PhD candidate. So Unicamp has been a partner with us, and we hope to have more exchanges, not only from Brazil to the US, but also from our department to some universities that are part of the pluriversity in the months that come. Maria's doctoral research explores relationships between art, AI technology, and politics, and has received prestigious scholarships from the federal Brazilian government through two agencies, CNPq and CAPES. She is trained as a journalist and has a master's degree in scientific and cultural communication from the Laboratory of Advanced Studies in Journalism at Unicamp. And she has also a bachelor's degree in journalism from Casper Libero faculty. Recent academic interests and professional activities that Maria has include areas such as computational propaganda, digital activism, AI social studies, techno aesthetics, and philosophy of technology. So join me welcoming Maria to the seminar. Thank you, Chris, and for the seminar series for allowing this to happen.
So do you hear me? Okay, is everything okay? Okay, before I start my presentation, I'd like to thank the organization of the seminar series, which I have been following for the last few months, and I enjoyed a lot. So I am very glad to be here today. And I would like to thank Dr. Fernanda Rosa and the STS department for receiving me as a visiting scholar in the last 6 months. My time at Virginia Tech has been the most enriching, both academically and personally. I have learned a lot with you, and also I have felt at home since my first week here in Blacksburg. So I really would like to thank you so very much for this experience. And also I'd like to thank the institutions that finance my research for the grants I received. My PhD is financed with a CNPq scholarship, and for the period in the United States, I had a CAPES scholarship, both issued by the Brazilian government. I also had complementary financial aid for the fieldwork research in Southern California from the graduate program Social Sciences and from the FIPEX Fund, both from University of Campinas. So now I'm gonna start. And can you put yes, great, thank you. So every research has a point of start and also a way of telling how we get from one point to another, which to some naive eyes could be interpreted as a very straight line, no detours, no losses along the way. When we try to draw a comprehensible line, a comprehensible map after traversing a terrain we thought we knew, we usually notice that most of it we have never seen before. As a PhD candidate, I can say that we are driven by the maze itself, and the twists and unexpected turns can be the very core and richness of one's research. If the research map I will present today works out well, and I hope it will, it can help someone to get even more lost in the future. In this talk, I would like to present part of the map I've been drawing in the last months, or in other words, on what I've been working as a doctoral researcher. First, I will introduce a section of the theoretical landscape I'm based on, which is mostly philosophy of technology. Secondly, I will briefly analyze two art pieces from artists whose work I have seen during my fieldwork research in the United States, Rafika Nadal and Suzanne Kite. Even though they both explore questions related to artificial intelligence, I intend to shed light on their contrast, highlighting how different cosmologies can manifest when art and technoscience are together. From the variety of threads I could pull on my academic cat's cradle, I would like to take patterns as a point of start. Yes, I'm interested in patterns. Technological patterns, visual patterns, even invisible patterns. I know the term pattern can be very generic, but sometimes a lack of specificity can be used in one's favor as a way of beginning the journey. By trying to define what patterns are or can be, how they function, or for which uses they are employed in different places and contexts, I started to draw a line. But why am I talking about patterns in a STS seminar? With the expressive growth of artificial intelligence in the last few years and the massive attention and investments that this kind of technology has received, it has been in the center of many STS scholars' concerns. How does it function or can function? For what purpose it has been used? Which would be the best way to regulate it or not? Or how to make it more ethical are a few of the issues raised by the use and development of AI technology. And the question of the patterns, it's in its very core. Here, we are all aware that AI is not some kind of autonomous intelligence, an alien mind that develops apart from human existence. Scholars and scientists might not completely understand how some of its parts work, which is usually called the black box problem. But it is still a technology that functions according to some assumptions and configurations. As Pasquinelli and Euler argue, it is better to describe it not as some kind of cognition, but rather of perception. It is, in their words, called an instrument of knowledge magnification that helps to perceive features, patterns, and correlation through vast space of data beyond human reach. Closing quote. And how does AI magnify knowledge or bring to human attention some patterns? As an instrument of knowledge, an AI system needs to have, in Pasquinelli and Euler definition, essentially three features: an object to be observed, which is here the training dataset, an instrument of observation, or the learning algorithm, and a final representation, which is the statistical model. In that sense, this technology operates basically in three modalities: training, classification, and if it is the case, prediction. In the center are all of those three, the patterns. Quote, in more intuitive term, these modalities can be called pattern extraction, pattern recognition, and pattern generation, ending quote. This instrument of knowledge magnification can be used in a variety of ways: to determine the statistical distribution of a characteristic, to identify a specific trait or a group of traits among others, as in facial recognition, to alert for an atypical behavior, as in movement detection cameras, to create something based on previous forms of that, as text or image generators, etc. As a tool for pattern extraction, recognition, and/or generation, AI technology could naively be taken as neutral and objective, capable of revealing reality as it is. However, its modes of functioning also bring specific notions within, which impact the ways on how this reality can or cannot be accessed, known, quantified, or changed. The modes of understanding and relating to the environment and to other existences can have many forms, and pattern recognition is just one of them. Related to perception, it is a way of trying to express and expand what might not be immediately visible. In that sense, AI is an instrument that accesses certain aspects of reality, and obviously not all, in a very specific way, based on principles about what is possible to be known and how. It is not uncommon for us to establish a relationship with technology as something completely external, a neutral and useful tool that will only perform functions in a direct, objective way. But, as the French philosopher Gilbert Simondon indicates, this can be as problematic as understanding a technical object as an entity capable of doing anything, with its own will and potentially a threat to humans. The philosopher argues that those two ways of establishing relationship with technologies, even though contradictory, are both reflections of the same problem, a vision that opposes culture and technology, humanity and machine. Simondon is part of a trajectory on French philosophical thought that aims to take into account non-human agencies, and he has given special attention in his work to what he calls, quote, the mode of existence of technical objects, unquote. This is one of his famous books. He had a recent translation in English. It was initially published in 1958, but in English it was translated in 2017 by University of Minnesota Press. Simondon proposes to consider the contact between what is considered human and what is considered machine in other terms, far from a logic that separates them completely. Rather, we should look at their relations, their continuities, and what they create together. In other words, it's not about understanding technology as an existence closed in itself, isolated, but in constant relations with its context and whose modes of functioning are marked by specific epistemology. The idea that technology would be something neutral, merely useful, masks the premises that engender a specific way of functioning. On that basis, Yuk Hui, a philosopher from Hong Kong, argues that technology is not universal but localized. Different societies and cosmologies can develop completely different technologies. Thus, the author proposes that we think about technodiversity, a concept which he intends to, quote, rearticulate the issue of technology. Instead of understanding it as an anthropological universe, we need to rediscover a multiplicity of cosmotechniques and reconstruct their histories in order to project the possibilities that lie dormant in them into the Anthropocene. Closing quote. And it is worth mentioning that technology considered universal is a part of a fundamentally modern Western Cartesian epistemology. Thus, removing this power of totality and thinking of a technology, one among others and strongly localized, would also help us to visualize technologies on cosmologies, the epistemological assumptions it carries within, and the relationships it establishes with its context. Trying to bring to light the cosmologies that engender different technologies also means locating them, understanding what their limits are and what relations they can create. By expanding the possibilities of comprehending the world and the ways of relating to it, one can hopefully reduce the certainties that serve to eliminate diversity. In my research, I'm interested in delving into the variety of cosmotechniques from a specific standpoint: the relationship between cosmotechniques with contemporary art. That is often the field in which the aesthetics of a socio-cultural context can be perceived in a more evident way. This means that by looking at what and how different artists are producing, one could better assess how a shared structure of perception and sensitivity works in a specific context. As Paul Preciado, a Spanish philosopher, very well summarizes, aesthetics, quote, aesthetic can be understood, quote, as the articulation between the social organization of life, the structure of perception, and the configuration of a shared sensitive experience. Aesthetics, therefore, is a shared sensorial world, but also a subjective consciousness capable of decoding and understanding it. Closing quote. This book still has not been translated to English, so this passage here I translated from Portuguese. In Brazil, I already have the translation. It would be soon delivered, I guess, so maybe it's different from when it is published. So, therefore, we could say that art can explore and reveal a specific way of perceiving and experiencing the world. This experience is simultaneously subjective and collective. Since it occurs from the regulation of the senses, they are necessarily social and political. Thus, if I am interested in investigating patterns as a way of delving into the cosmologies present in different technologies, looking at their ways of functioning in relation to aesthetics could contribute to expanding the possibilities of understanding a specific sociocultural context. So, that being said, what was the trail I've been tracing among contemporary art? Which are the patterns I found along the way that I linked in my map? The connection here will work mostly by contrast. I intend to highlight how the possibilities of extracting, recognizing, and generating patterns are also tied to cosmological pluralities. First, I would like to talk about one of the most trending artists that currently uses artificial intelligence to create artworks, Refik Anadol. During my time in the United States, I went to Southern California for a few days to do fieldwork research in its museums, galleries, and other art institutes. And Anadol is one of the artists whose work I went to see in person during this period. His piece, California Landscapes Generative Studies, was a part of an exhibition called Seeing the Unseeable, Data Design Art, which took place at the Williamson Gallery in the Arts and College of Design in Pasadena. This Istanbul-born and Los Angeles-based artist mixed art, technology, science, and architecture. In his official website, he defined himself as, quote, pioneer in the aesthetics of machine intelligence, closing quote, and says that his work, quote, explores how the perception and experience of time and space are radically changing now that machines dominate our everyday lives, closing quote. Working mostly with installations and what he calls data sculptures and paintings, he transforms large datasets into moving images and abstracts compositions. His artworks have already been exhibited in various institutions and museums around the world, from gallery screens to all-size outdoor installations. Recently, he got special public attention for his exhibition Unsupervised, which took place at the Museum of Modern Art in New York from November 2022 to October 2023. This art piece is a part of a series called Machine Hallucinations. At the entrance of the museum, a large screen showed a mesmerizing sequence of moving forms and colors. Mostly abstract, here and there one could almost identify some reference to some famous work in art history. Using 138,151 pieces of metadata from the 200 years of artwork that compose the MoMA's collection archive, this exhibition proposes to see the museum through the mind of a machine. In order to do so, Rafik and Adobe Studio used undeveloped algorithms to code, unfold, unrecognized layers of our external realities, closing code. Or, in other words, to identify patterns on an archive whose comprehension is beyond human reach. Then, the system itself created links and clusters connecting artworks and started to imagine what could have been in between, or to create composed abstract images based on its data categorization. Thus, what was shown to the general public was the result of image generation on the latent space of the unfolded patterns on MoMA's archive. Describing, maybe it's not that easy to understand, so I took a video. I'll put just the first 5 minutes because he explains how this works. I think it's better to understand.
Many of the things that we interact with daily are powered by AI in some way, but there's very little understanding about it.
There are artists that are using AI as a tool, and there are artists that want the people to understand more about AI.
We sometimes feel captive to or passive to the technologies that are simply given to us. And for a number of artists, they want to intervene in those processes at a high level and think about existential questions of free will, of human will, machine will, but also questions of perception. How can we see things that are actually not made for us to see? One thing that artists have always been very good at is taking a tool that exists in the world and making it do something it's not supposed to do. When artists are looking at technology as another kind of tool to experiment with, or maybe even subvert or divert, they're saying, I'm not just going to reject this technology wholesale at all. In fact, I might embrace it, but I might try and make it do something else.
This is the show at MoMA right now, how it looks like, how many people there. Like, that's like, wow. Last year, we saw amazing breakthroughs in AI research, like OpenAI's DALL-E, DALL-E 2, ChatGPT, Stable Diffuse, Midjourney. Like, these are all actually following a very similar pattern, which are extremely supervised, extremely labeled, multimodal AI algorithms, allowing us to interact with them.
In quote-unquote supervised learning, which is the more conventional mode of machine learning, humans are the ones that are essentially tagging these bits of information from the outset, saying, here's a picture of a pencil, this is a pencil. AI is quite good at saying, if you tell me to create a bluebird, I'll show you a picture of a bluebird that looks real.
But this was, to me, not very inspiring, to be honest. To me, what was more inspiring is what happens if we don't use the technology as it's imposed to us, but use it a different way. And in this context, Unsupervised, the exhibition now at MoMA, is actually doing something different. It's not exactly following the labeling data or try to mimic reality. It is trying to dream and speculate an imagination of a machine.
So unsupervised learning means that actually you're letting the machine learning model do that tagging based on its own sort of
Who knows?
black box. Yeah, a lot of it is a black box. Like, we don't actually know what's going on in there.
For unsupervised, we took the entire metadata of MoMA archives, which is around 138,000 images.
And Rafiq used that data to create custom software artwork that would interpret and transform MoMA's collection data. He has created a large-scale presentation of this real-time software artwork. It's almost like a performance. It's always changing. The machine learning model has built an incredibly complex classification system or map of MoMA's collection. It has decided it's going to group a number of data points over here and a number of data points over here. And you create a kind of galaxy. But in that galaxy, there's a lot of empty space. So then the machine learning model, in concert with Rafiq's team, is sort of navigating through that empty space and saying, nothing exists here, but what could exist? And that is where the kind of speculative and hypothetical and even what we might call a kind of dreaming starts to take place.
I should really show you this. This is like really next level. So what you see on the left side is completely not real. These are all AI-made potential AI dreams. So what we can do here, I'm literally flying in the latent space of MoMA archive and reconstructing these potential dreams. Once AI starts to create this new reality, we learn that there is no any borders between these biased categories that we need as humans to understand things. That is a truly multi-dimensional imagination. It is blending past, now, and future. It is blending multiple materials. It's just a convergence of things that we thought they are independent.
The AI is not using.
So I think with the video, we can understand better what it is about. So in the context of unsupervised, patterns do have a central importance. By identifying and classifying them, it becomes possible to create new images and put in relationship artworks that, from a standard perspective, were not necessarily related. Besides its clear beauty, this exhibition can help understand how an AI system can work, and especially which connections it establishes based on a giant volume of information that humans cannot process in the same way. However, differently from the most image generator AI tools available to the general public, the artist's preference here is not for resemblance, but for abstraction. And this choice to switch the way the machine will create images is not irrelevant. For most AI systems used for image generation, such as DALL-E or Midjourney, the resemblance is the key point. Mechanisms are trained to reproduce the patterns they identify in the most similar way, in order to simulate what has already been seen before. The quality of a good image generator tool is measured by how realistic images appear to be, and it has its reasons. The automation of labor is at the core of the development of this kind of technology, since it tries to reproduce things that look like what has already been made before. And if you'd like to know more about this subject, I would recommend the case study, Ethical and Legal Considerations of Generative AI, How is it Hurting?, for our colleague Sarish Altaf. Back to Rafiq Anadol, the artist employs a tool that is mostly used to replicate the patterns it finds in the image. However, he twists its logic by exploring what could have been in between the images, the connections. In some sort, that's why the artwork is called unsupervised. The goal is to explore the links the machine makes, and not to order exactly how it should or should not do it. One could question, naturally, how unsupervised it really is, or even if machine hallucinations would be the best name for the series of artworks using this method. Nevertheless, here technology is indeed being used as a way of establishing new connections and not only reproductions. The artist argues that the goal of the project is to explore, quote, data aesthetics, closing quote, and that, quote, this expanding data universe not only represents the interpolation of data as synthesis, but also becomes a latent cosmos in which hallucinatory potential arises for a novel form of artistic creativity, closing quote. Indeed, this work expands the possibilities of perception, but how far does this leap go? After all, the datasets the artist uses are still measuring, quantifying, and/or cataloging the world according to a very specific range of instances. Data mining and pattern categorization mean express and allow certain aspects in a Western context. Could it be other forms? So I would like to move to the second art piece, the one from Suzanne Kite. During my fieldwork research in Southern California, one of the places I went was the Red Card Center, or the Roy and Edna Disney Colored Theater in Los Angeles. There, I was interested in an exhibition called All Watched Over by Machines of Love and Grace, which, by its own description, quote, addresses one of the most pressing issues of our time, the impact of artificial intelligence, by proposing alternative directions for its future and how it changes the relationship between the human and non-human, closing quote. The exhibition took place at the entry of the Red Cat Center, and I found it quite interesting. It presented artworks for 9 different artists, all of them exploring ways on how contemporary questions can be addressed by AI. Some of them offered alternatives to think of our relationships to AI based on feminist, queer, indigenous, and/or decolonial imaginaries. Also, other works explored how AI could be a powerful tool to deal with issues like racism, obliteration of ancient knowledges, or nature preservation. I'll now focus on the specific artwork called Tokatakia Iglumashke in the Future Eye by Suzanne Kite. Ogala Lakota, artist and scholar, Suzanne Kite was born and raised in Southern California and now lives in Catskill, New York. She's one of the authors of Indigenous Protocol and Artificial Intelligence Position Paper, a work collective written that delineates what could be an indigenous-centered and ethical procedure to the development of artificial intelligence. On her artistic work, she explores machine learning systems and body interfaces along with traditional Lakota techniques such as embroidery and dreaming. For the Lakota people, as the description of the artwork said, quote, dreaming is a sacred practice. Women pray for a dream and receive through them symbols that they transmit through art. Kite works with women in her community to interpret the symbols she receives, composing scores from them that she often performs with a locally hosted generative adversarial network she has built to study indigenous data, closing quote. And in this specific piece, quote, the artist shows a score expressing dreams of traveling toward home. She embroiders deer hides with maps. It's this one, if you can see there. The scores are the picture on the left, on the right, I'm sorry, and the deer hides is this black thing in the wall. So she embroiders deer hides with maps of the land and stars above the Black Hills, an unceded land sacred to the Lakota people, now dotted with abandoned uranium mines that poison the groundwater. She incorporates gravel from mines near her current home in Catskill, New York, similarly unceded land that is now exposed to random. Bringing together physical and non-physical materials, the piece meditates on the ethics of machine learning, both the destructive process of extraction needed to build machines and the integration of indigenous ontologies into the datasets from which machines learn. Closing quote. Kite explores planes of reality that, on a Western logic, would not be that connected to each other. The minerals and the cosmos, the stones and the dreams. As the Lakota cosmology comprehends the world, she expands the possibilities of relationships between different beings. In an article about how indigenous epistemologies could help address the AI question, she wrote, quote, AI is formed not only from code, but from materials of the earth. To remove the concept of AI from its materiality is to sever this connection. Forming a relationship to AI, we form a relationship to the mines and the stones. Relations with AI are therefore relations with exploited resources. If you are able to approach this relationship ethically, we must consider the ontological status of each of the parts which contribute to AI, all the way back to the mines from which our technology's material resources emerge. I'm not making an argument about which entities qualify as relations or display enough intelligence to deserve relationships. By turning to Lakota ontology, these questions become irrelevant. Instead, indigenous ontologies ask us to take the world as the interconnected whole that it is, where the ontological status of non-humans is not inferior to that of humans. Closing quote. And here, in her work, the ways of relating to the world impact directly the possibilities of data mining and pattern extraction, recognition, and generation. In her artwork, Kite puts together physical and non-physical elements, and the way their connections can be made comprehensible to her is through the symbols she dreams and expresses. The patterns, in this case, are not extracted through statistical distribution, but rather accessed by an ancient and embodied technology, recognized within the community and then concretized on visual scores that can have multiple functions. In a certain way, we could say that she proposes a translation between different planes of reality. And to conclude, I just would like to explore this aspect of translation a little bit more. Donna Haraway, in her famous Cyber Manifesto, had already said that a common ground for communication sciences and modern biologies was the attempt to translate any being into a problem of coding, a, quote, common language in which all resistance to instrumental control disappears and all heterogeneity can be submitted to disassembly, reassembly, investment, and exchange, closing quote. Under the influence of cybernetics, it seemed to be possible to quantify every aspect of the world into information. Following this path, Laimer Garcia dos Santos, a Brazilian sociologist, defined what he called the cybernetic turn, an alliance between the capital and technoscience that generated a radical transformation on the logic that guides the possibilities of understanding and acting in the world. As he describes, cybernetics proposes a notion of information as an effort to translate every existence into numerical digital terms. This would allow the creation of a common language between the inert matter, the living beings, and the technical objects, breaking down several previous communication barriers between different domains of realities. The world then becomes an inexhaustible database, and any problem begins to be formulated on coding and decoding possibilities. In this scenario, the translation is the key point, but in a very specific way, an attempt to homogenization. And this aspect gets even more evident if we compare how pattern recognition is conceived and used in the previously mentioned works of Rafika Nadal and Suzanne Kite. In Unsupervised, every aspect of the artworks from MoMA's collections had to be translated into a common language. The differences can only work together if they can be adjusted to fit in the same plane. There is creation and there is the establishment of new relations in Anadol's work, but only if homogenization is achieved first. On the other hand, in Kite's work, the translation is not necessarily achieved through homogenization. The symbols she dreams and reproduces are a form of making contact between different planes of reality, but here the difference is sustained. As she explains when writing about Lakota cosmology, the minerals and the stones are very important entities, and so are the dreams and the immaterial world. And in the Trocatakia y Glumashke, in the future I piece, all those existences are there. They are in contact, they create something together within the differences. This was also expressed in the materials listed at the description of the artwork displayed in the exhibition. It says dreams, deer hide, conductive thread, glass, plastic, stones, cosmos, land. So in this presentation, I tried to delve mostly not into what patterns are, but what they can be. And for that, I tried to make an effort to comprehend how they work both in their interior and in relation to their exterior, how they function and how they relate to their context, especially because I understand that those aspects are strongly connected. Here, I presented part of the map I've been tracing in the field of relations between art and technoscience, but the lines I try to draw are not always a continuity. Indeed, sometimes the connections work better by contrast, and it is within the difference that the relationships can be made. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm assuming that everyone on Zoom can hear me because this worked a little bit ago. So we're going to move to questions, and as always, we'll move back and forth between questions on Zoom and questions in the room. Oh, we already have hands up. Very exciting. So remember, if you're on Zoom, you can raise a hand, and Lois and I will coordinate how we move back and forth between the questions, and you can either unmute yourself and ask the question yourself, or you can pose a question in the chat, and we'll read it for you. But we're going to go ahead and get started in the room.
Right. Thanks so much, Maria, and especially I appreciate that you brought so many beautiful artworks to the seminars. They are all magnificent and very beautiful. I think I have one question about the relationship between art, technology, and maybe politics a little bit. I think since both Endo and Kite, they try to incorporate their art with technology in different formats and to present or to try to help people think think about technology in a different way. So I just wondering, how can this kind of like new form of, we can say AI art, maybe not AI art, but AI assisted artwork, help us think differently, or help us think about a different form of technology or a different form of politics, and even to address something from kite even to some kind of new cosmology and politics. That's my question.
So what I think it is important in relation to politics when we think about technology and art is to think about diversity. And I think Kai's work is really amazing. She has so many branches of acting. So she is a scholar, she's an artist, she's involved with her community. And it is important to strengthen that technology is not the same, do not need to be the same for everyone. And the relation to the world, the relation to technology can be different. And when she does that, she's always saying, well, we exist, her community exists, her community has a very strong way of seeing things. And I mean, this is, in her work, I think is one of the most rich contributions to politics. I don't know if I answered your question.
Thank you. I really appreciated the talk. I have a lot of historical questions that I will not ask yet.
Thank you.
So I'll ask a basic question that I think builds on what Jan was saying. For you, what are the stakes of this work?
I'm sorry.
What are the stakes? Like, what do you see as what is at stake? I don't know how else to say it in. What matters? Yeah. Why does this work matter to you?
Their work.
Why is this work important to you? Why is this comparative work? What do you hope to do by comparing these two artists?
Mm-hmm. So again, when I compare, I think it helps you see that the way of relating to the world are very plural. So cybernetics is a way of translating reality to a specific language, and sometimes it is taken as an access direct to reality that can reveal so many things. And when we look at art, we can see that there are so many other ways of relating to these realities. So again, I think it's very dangerous to understand technology as something universal and to trying to translate every kind of existence to the same kind of language. And the work I'm trying to do is to put light in there are other ways of understanding how these relations go, how we can relate to reality, how we can translate it to another, one plane to another. And well, I believe that's the stake of the work, but I don't know if everyone would agree, but I think it's a very important thing to do.
Thank you, Mario, for this amazing work. I have two questions. My first question is, you said you did field work. I would like to know what was exactly your method, and it was observation, or what kind of field work did you work? And also my second question is, regarding the generative AIs like Midjourney, because it's kind of like interesting to me as well, like, do you think with these unsupervised training models, still the generated AI, the generative AIs can produce Western cultural hegemony, or vice versa, it can be used for decolonial practices, especially from global south, because we have open source softwares now for generative AIs, and I'm not sure whether they are working with unsupervised learning or supervised learning, but do you think that even this approach could lead to have more Western-centric hegemony in art, or it can be vice versa? It can help for decolonial production of art. Thank you.
So the first question, my fieldwork is mostly in exhibitions and museums, galleries, and other art institutions, and I am most interested in see the art pieces. So while I was here, I went to Los Angeles, I went to 13 museums, and I saw the exhibitions there, and especially there was an event there called PST Art that had a common theme. There was art and science collide. So all the exhibitions had the same common theme, but exploring different aspects of that. So yeah, my fieldwork's more, I go to see the art piece and to interact with that. So Suzanne Kite, I saw her work in Los Angeles. I didn't know her before. The second question, it is the difficult one. So I think it depends, because we could say that this kind of system could be used for other purposes, for other kind of creations, but also they are already built with a Western way of understanding the world. So just a little example. I was planning to talk about this in the presentation, but I ended up taking out because it was too long. But only the concept of what is a realistic image is already something from the Western world. It is create. If you go to the Renaissance, the perspective, they created this illusion of the continuity between the real world and the image. This is something that if you go, for instance, to the Arab world in that time, it doesn't make any sense. The real image is not represented. The real cannot be represented that way. So only this is already something that is already marked by a specific way of understanding the world and relating to the world. So besides that, you have how the code function, how it can read the patterns and reproduce it. So all these instances are marked by a specific cosmology. And again, we have also the question of ethics, because those systems that we have now were trained in a material that was not necessarily allowed to be trained. So if you want to do something decolonial using a tool that was training in something not exactly ethical, you have another issue there. So I think it's a very difficult question, because you have, the answer is not let's make it something new from zero, because I don't know if it is possible. So how do we do that? I don't know. My answer is I don't know.
We have an online question. Yeah. Can you go ahead, Nave? You can unmute yourself.
Oh, sorry, it's me. Am I going? Oh, I didn't hear my name. I'm so sorry. All right. Hi, everybody. First of all, I want to say congratulations, Maria, and that I'm super excited with your presentation. Um, and I feel very thankful and honored to have shared with you um, this part of your research that you did here at Virginia Tech. I learned a lot with you. And I'm very happy that you mentioned some of the authors that we are used to read in other parts of the world, but haven't been able to uh, read here in the US since I got here, like Simondon, Preciado, Pasquinelli. Um, they're definitely reference for us, and in this idea of thinking other ways, possible modes of existence of technology as we know it and as it is right now. And I think that these authors point towards two very important things that I want to ask you if you could like reinforce a little bit more what's your statement as a researcher around these two things. One is that these are authors that are not as focused on colonialism as North America, but in capitalism, that it's a concept that we don't usually mention that much here. And the other thing is the role of art in imagining new possible systems, social systems, but also cultural systems that are the ones that somehow push and create technology culture. So I just wanted to ask you if you could tell us a little bit more about this relationship between capitalism, existing technology, and the role of art in new ways of thinking or creating. Thank you.
Thank you, Gala. I don't know where to look to answer to her, actually. So can I look to the camera, maybe? I don't know. Okay, that's great.
You can look at whatever you want, and I still know we are connected.
Oh, Gala, thank you so much. So that's a very important question, because in our countries, we are used to, as you said, studies other authors and other ways to criticize, think critically about the reality. So the question about capitalism and colonialism, this is always very present for us in social sciences in Brazil, and I believe for you in Argentina too. And I agree with you that the way the relation is constructed now, it can be difficult to create new worlds, because in some way the capitalism will reproduce itself. So in some sort, an idea that is true changing will not have the support needed to be developed. So you put me on a very tight situation here, Gala. Thank you so much for that. But but well, I will answer. I think I'll talk more about the possibility that art brings us to thinking about new worlds, new possibilities, new relations to the world. Because on that space, it can be more obvious. We can, since creativity is the main tool in this field, we tend to imagine that it's the field that we can have new ideas, new ways of conceiving the world. But I do think it's not the only one, because in academia too, we can do that effort. I think the creativity and the aim to think not only of what the world is and its problems, but what it can be, other possibilities, and how we can relate it to it differently, are also one of the richness in academia. So I don't know if I answer your question because it's a very tricky one. So thank you so much for participating.
Sorry. I do have a question. No, you went first. Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you, Maria. It was very interesting presentation, and I was really happy that you bring some kind of philosophical works into your presentation, because I'm a philosopher and I really love that classic old head-aching question. So I'm sorry, but I can't bring. Yeah, I'm gonna bring that some old philosophical question, because I wondered. What I wonder is the relationship between us and that the new patterns that are generated by unsupervised machine and the possibilities of the translation. Because not sure that this is a proper question to your presentation, but what I thought is that is old philosophical question, which is, what is it like to be a bat? And this is very old question from the philosophy of mind, that what it says is, for example, we are not able to understand or feel or perceive the things as a bat does, because bat use their auditory system to see something, and we're not gonna use this kind of system to use like that. So what I thought when I seeing that the video art from the generated by the unsupervised machine, that some kind of patterns are visible, then it turns out the pattern that we are familiar, then it changes it to some different patterns, then it turns out that another thing that we are familiar. So what I want to ask is that if we cannot perceive all patterns that are generated by the new machines, but some of them that are familiar to us, then how can we make some kind of new relationship between that new patterns are generated by the new machine? And is there any certain types of possibilities to translate, to make a relationship between those new patterns?
So I'm sorry, your question, I'm just trying to reformulate it, was how we can relate to those new patterns we don't actually know, we don't identify it. So I think this is one of the powers of art, of art piece, because somehow it opens the sensibility. We function identifying what we already know. So when we see something like that, we do identify some patterns and others we don't. But I think the most interesting thing is that we somehow are open to this new kind. So at first, maybe you don't really identify, you cannot really describe it, but you can feel it. You are touched in another way. And I think this other way of being touched by art, it is always very rich. I think we tend to relate to the world in a very logic way, trying to understand how it functions, how patterns work, this is it, this is that. But sometimes art allows this other connection, this connection with sensitivity. So I think that's when you don't understand the pattern or you don't recognize it, I think that's very rich, because it can open you to another way of relating to it. If you are open to, if you go to an art piece and say, well, I'm gonna feel what I have to feel, I'm gonna see what I have to see, and let's just be here and see what happens. So I don't really see that as a problem. I think I don't know if I answer your question.
Yeah, don't get me wrong, I'm agree with that. I just want to
Okay.
understand more thing.
Hi. It was a really great presentation. Thank you so much. And I love the topic. I love the comparison. And I wanted to think about the comparison a bit more as you were, talking. And it seems like in the first one with the MoMA, it's taking all of the pieces within MoMA, right? Categorizing and then filling in the interstitial spaces. And the kite installation, it wasn't made from AI, right? It was her or their imagining of how to stay with the tensions of all the plurality of the different sorts of ontologies. Would you be able to talk about, are there cooperatives or anybody working with like Lakota cosmologies to do something material with it, to reconfigure AI in different kinds of possibilities and ways? Like, are those activities? I'm sure I just don't know, and I wanted, if you knew, to talk about that.
So she works with that, actually. If you would ask who is the Lakota artist that works with AI, she was actually the first indigenous American artist that used AI in her practice. She has a lot of other artworks that uses directly AI systems. But what I think was very interesting in this piece is that it was exhibited in an exhibition that was AI themed. So all pieces there were somehow related to AI. And I think it is very interesting how she uses the translation and the patterns to put all these realities together. So somehow she speaks the language of AI, but no, because she does it like her cosmology functions. In that piece, there is no use of the AI system, actually, but the AI functioning is there. She is in dialogue with that, I believe. So that's why I brought it here, because I think it is strongly related to AI. In other works, she uses a system of AI to produce other things, so it's more evident in some way that since the system is there. But I think this artwork is really, really related to it. It's in the same universe, and it's another way of. And again, this is only her artistic work. In her academic work, she's very engaged in thinking about the relations between AI and indigenous knowledges, how AI can be constructed ethically and respecting indigenous knowledges. So she has publications about that. She's an important name in that field, both artistic and academic.
Thank you so much. And I wasn't, I hope you didn't take I was criticizing you bringing up second work as, I totally understand the connection that that is also a materiality that is AI.
Yeah.
I was just wondering if she also does.
Yeah, I thank you for the question, because I was thinking about that, but since I had to edit my speak because there's time, there's something I couldn't say, but yes, thank you for bringing up that there is no AI system in that piece specifically, but it is AI also, so it is interesting. Thank you so much.
Now I'm going to ask you a historical question.
Oh my gosh.
And an aesthetic question. And, I guess one of the things I'm trying to gather from this is that there's a sense that AI creates new aesthetic possibilities. But I'm curious, and I really am just curious, how what these artists are doing or what other artists in this domain space are doing that's different than what got categorized as quote unquote technological art from the 1960s onward. And then in both of these cases, they're solo artists working in studio environments or, really prominent museums. And in many ways, like the notion of the artist as you present it is pretty traditional, where the authority and the agency is coming from the artist's mind out into the world, where it seems like a lot of the conversation in and around artificial intelligence is about the kind of distribution, about collaboration with non-human entities and the like. So if I were to boil this down into a word, kind of aesthetically and historically, what's novel about what these folks are doing? And you might say that's not an important question, but I'm really curious.
So first of all, I agree with you that there is this, the importance of the artist, the person that decides. But in both cases, I think it is a little more collective than it used to be. So in the last decades, we had collective artworks, but for instance, Rafik Anadol has a studio. He has to have a lot of people from engineering, people developing the system, because he has his own AI system. And Kite, she works with her community. When she interprets the dreams and symbols she has, it has to be done within the community, because it's a practice for the Lakota people. You have to do with another woman in your community. So that's a thing, that it is not the artist completely alone. I understand that they are the mind, they are commanding it, but somehow there is a collective behind it. But your question about what is different from the decades before, if we think about artists that look at a way of functioning of a technology and try to dialogue with that and create it, using that or thinking about the way of functioning and creating other things, I don't think there is a difference, actually, if you think that this is the work of the artist. So, and I don't think that is a problem, because the technologies, they vary, and now we have these very trending technologies. There is AI, and it is interesting to see how art is related to that, how they go on dialogue with that. But I must say, I do not know as much as you do, obviously, about the artists for the last decade. I just know a little bit. Of course, I don't know that much. But in my very generical knowledge of them, I think that the most rich part of the work is still here, and it's good. I don't know. But I would like to know after what you think about that, because this is a very good question to be made to a historian, and I really appreciate that.
Go ahead, Fernanda. Oh, sorry.
Hey. Are you having echo? Can you hear me better now?
That's good.
Yeah, I was laughing at the situation about the question that Matt asked, because if we were in an indigenous context, that question about what is new would not make sense. And it makes sense here because of our Western thinking. And that is an amazing way to start comprehending the connections and disconnections that exist when we are talking about these topics. And my question to Maria is about AI specifically, because I don't know if any of you in the room or even Maria have had contact with a book that's called Ways of Being, Animals, Plants, Machines, The Search for a Planetary Intelligence. It's a new book by James Bridle, and it called my attention because of the title. Specifically, there were some reviews in some outlets in the US, and I went to look at this book, and I felt so angry with the book, and I felt pissed sometimes with the book, but maybe I was wrong. So I'll try to ask the question and see what Maria thinks about that. I think we work with the colonial thinking and indigenous knowledges and indigenous people in general have a different way of looking at the world, as you were mentioning during your presentation. However, it's very difficult to bring this to the table in a way that understanding is really comprehended by the other. It seems that there is always a space of translation that does not work out. And maybe this is not a problem. Maybe this is how things are. But what this book brought to me, and I didn't realize that, is that AI is helping Western thinking and Western thinkers to realize that there are other patterns that can be produced, but that they are not completely aware of, but that they are curious about. So AI is generating some kind of curiosity, some kind of acknowledgement that we in the Western world do not know everything, or there are things that our machines are knowing now more than us, more than ourselves. And in that way, AI is kind of coming to help the colonial thinkers to say, hey, maybe now you can consider that there are other forms of knowledge. So maybe a non-human may be coming just to help other humans to be more comprehended. So this is a question coming from a space of hope. But I don't know if you agree, considering the arts that you are studying, or if you think that this is not really where we are going. And thank you for the presentation.
So can I answer? It's okay. So well, thank you, Fernanda, for this question. Before I answer your question, I would like just to talk about something you bring up, is that how the indigenous people perceive the new. And this is something interesting, because when I was talking with my advisor about those art pieces, he made me a question that I was really amazed with Suzanne Kite's work, and I was talking about her to him, and he asked me, do you think she is producing something new? She's producing some new kind of relation? And I don't think so. I answered him, I don't think that is her goal. I can be wrong, but it seems to me that the goal there is not to create the new, but to sustain the different, which are, well, it can be new for us, but they are not interested in that kind of creation. And of course, every indigenous cosmology has its own way of thinking, but in Brazil we have Ayrton Krenak, that is an indigenous scholar, and he talks about ancestor future. The future is ancestor. So for the Krenak, the future is not understood as something completely new, but about the ancestors, the relation to the older, and to, I mean, it's another way of conceiving the future, the new, the creation, and I just wanted to bring this up because it is so amazing when we read those things. And of course, Krenak has nothing to do with Lakota, just thought about Ayrton Krenak, but it is very common to see that the new is not really a question for indigenous people. So, your question, Fernanda, I have not read this book you mentioned, but I have seen this vision that of hope, that AI can make Western culture see and understand other ways of existing, other kinds of existences. And I have also seen, not this book because I haven't read it, but there is a philosopher that was saying that with cybernetics, we had actually what Bruno Latour was talking about, there is no differences between nature and culture. The cybernetics was the concretization of that understanding of the world. And I was very shocked because I am used to criticize cybernetics and this kind of technology, and this philosopher was saying, well, this is a way of understanding that there are continuities between all those existences. So what I think is that it is good to have hope. I like those, when we have those hope thinking, but we have to operate then critically. So I think the best way would be to have a balance between hope and critic, because if you are too critic also, we just cannot work. I mean, it's just so sad, and I don't know, but maybe balancing hope and critic, we can go somewhere new. I don't know. So that's how I answer your question. I don't know if it's enough.
Okay, we're going to let you stop answering questions now, Maria. Thank you for that exchange, the two of you, to close us out. And please join me in thanking Maria. This was an amazing presentation. I think a lot of us wish we were in your suitcase when you went to LA later this year. So thank you so much for sharing this with us.
Thank you so much for receiving me.
Yeah, and thanks everyone for being here today.